This isn't just a baseball rivalry. This is a war over identity, over pride, over who actually owns the greatest city on earth. Two teams, one city, and a hatred so deep it runs through bloodlines, through borough lines, through family dinners that have ended in silence. Divided. Picture New York City in the early 1960s. The Yankees were gods. Not just a good team, not just a great team, they were the single most dominant franchise in the history of professional sports. 27 World Series championships. Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle. They didn't just play baseball in New York, they were New York. The pinstripes weren't a uniform, they were a crown. And the Bronx? The Bronx was their kingdom. But here's what people forget. Before 1962, New York had three baseball teams: the Yankees and the Bronx, the Giants and the Dodgers, the beloved working-class, borough-proud Giants and Dodgers sharing the soul of Brooklyn and Manhattan and Queens. And then, in 1957, something happened that broke this city's heart in two. The Giants left. The Dodgers left. They packed up and moved to California, chasing money and sunshine, abandoning millions of fans who had given them everything. New York was left with a wound and only one team, the Yankees. And this is where the resentment begins. Because for Yankees fans, this was confirmation of what they already believed. There was only ever one real New York team. There had always only been one. But for the fans of those lost teams, the ex-Dodgers faithful in Brooklyn, the Giants loyalists in Queens, the working-class families who couldn't afford box seats at Yankee Stadium and didn't want them anyway, this felt like conquest, like the Yankees had won by default, like the city had been handed over to a franchise that represented everything they were not: money, power, arrogance. And so New York City did something remarkable. It demanded a new team. In 1962, the New York Mets were born. They were, from the very beginning, a disaster. 40 wins, 120 losses, the worst record in modern baseball history. Manager Casey Stengel, a legend who had guided the Yankees to 7 World Series titles, looked at his new roster and said, and this is a real quote, "Can't anybody here play this game?" They were lovable losers. They were a joke, but they were the people's team. And the people embraced them completely. Because those fans who had lost their teams, those Brooklyn kids and Queens families and blue-collar workers who had nothing in common with the Bronx, they found their home in the Mets. They found their identity. They found something to believe in that was theirs. The Yankees had the legacy, the rings, the history. The Mets had the heart. And from that very first season, in the back of everyone's mind was a question that nobody wanted to say out loud. What happens when these two teams collide? For decades, the rivalry simmered but never truly ignited. Because in baseball, for most of its history, American League and National League teams simply didn't play each other during the regular season. The Yankees were AL, the Mets were NL. They existed in the same city but in different universes. They would occasionally meet in spring training, in exhibition games, in the Crosstown Series charity events that felt more like neighborhood block parties than real competition. But it wasn't real. Not yet. Then came 1997. Major League Baseball introduced interleague play. For the first time, teams from different leagues would face each other during the regular season, and suddenly the Yankees and Mets had to look each other in the eye. June 16, 1997, Yankee Stadium. It was the first official regular season interleague game between the two franchises, and the city felt electric in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. 56,000 people packed into the stadium. The noise was different that night, sharper, more personal. This wasn't two teams playing a game. This was two sides of a city finally settling something. The Yankees won, and the taunting started almost immediately. But it was what happened 3 years later that changed everything forever. The year 2000. The Yankees were a dynasty in full flight. 3 consecutive World Series championships. Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Paul O'Neill, Bernie Williams, a roster that felt inevitable, unstoppable, almost mythological. They were the team of the century, literally. Sports Illustrated had said so. The Mets, meanwhile, were legitimate, finally, undeniably legitimate. Mike Piazza behind the plate, Edgardo Alfonso, Al Leiter on the mound. They had won the National League pennant, and they were not coming to the World Series to participate. They were coming to win. New York had never seen anything like it. A Subway Series, a World Series between the Yankees and the Mets, two teams from the same city, separated by a train ride, competing for the championship of baseball. The last time it had happened was 1956, and now, after 44 years, it was back. The city fractured along lines that had been drawn decades before. Every bodega, every bar, every office, every family dinner table became a battlefield. You were either pinstripes or blue and orange. There was no middle ground. There was no diplomatic answer. People ended friendships. Workplaces divided. In some neighborhoods, you could feel the tension just walking down the street. And then, Game 2 happened, and it became about something else entirely. Roger Clemens, Mike Piazza. July of that same year, Clemens had hit Piazza in the head with a fastball in an interleague game, a frightening, dangerous, deliberate-feeling moment that sent Piazza to the ground and the baseball world into an uproar. Was it intentional? Clemens said no. Nobody believed him. Now, in Game 2 of the World Series, they would face each other again. Piazza came to the plate. The entire city held its breath. On the first pitch, Piazza shattered his bat. The barrel spun toward the mound. Clemens picked it up and threw it directly toward Piazza as he ran toward first base. Benches cleared, voices erupted, and a rivalry that had been building for 38 years had its defining moment. The Yankees won that World Series in 5 games. The dynasty continued. The Mets went home. But something had crystallized. Something had become permanent. Because every Mets fan who watched Clemens throw that broken bat, every fan who watched the Yankees celebrate on their field, every fan who had to listen to their Yankees-loving coworker or brother-in-law or next-door neighbor gloat for the next 6 months, they didn't get over it. They stored it, they carried it, and they waited. To understand why this rivalry cuts so deep, you have to understand what the Bronx and Queens actually represent. The Bronx is mythology, it's grit and survival, and one of the most remarkable cultural stories in American history. It is the birthplace of hip-hop. It is a borough that was literally burning in the 1970s, that watched its neighborhoods collapse and its people scatter, and rebuilt itself through sheer collective will. Yankees fans from the Bronx don't follow a team. They claim a legacy. They inherit something. When you grow up in the Bronx and you put on that interlocking NY, you are connecting yourself to Ruth and Jeter and all 27 championships like a birthright. Queens is different. Queens is the most ethnically diverse urban area in the entire world. It is taxi drivers and nurses and restaurant workers and first-generation Americans from every corner of the planet. It is not glamorous in the way the Yankees are glamorous. It is real, complicated, loud in a different way. Mets fans from Queens have a chip on their shoulder that never fully goes away, and they wear it proudly, because that chip is the truth of who they are. The Yankees represent empire, and not everyone wants to root for an empire. This is what casual observers miss when they look at this rivalry and see just 2 baseball teams. There is a genuine class narrative embedded in the hatred. Yankees fans are perceived, fairly or not, as people who expect to win, who buy championships, who look at the Mets with a kind of regal dismissiveness. Mets fans are perceived, fairly or not, as people defined by suffering, by near misses, by potential that never fully delivers, and both sides resent the other's perception intensely. The Yankees fan resents being called a frontrunner, a corporate robot who inherited glory without earning it. The Mets fan resents being called a loser, a masochist who has made peace with disappointment. And so, every argument between them carries all of this weight. It's never just about the standings. It's about identity, about what kind of New Yorker you are, about what you value and why. The media made it worse. The back pages of the New York Post and the Daily News turned every interleague series into theater, headlines dripping with contempt, beat writers who understood that tension sells newspapers, talk radio hosts who spent hours stoking fires that didn't need any help burning. In a city of 8 million people, the Yankees and Mets became the language through which New Yorkers argued about themselves. Every great rivalry has its flashpoints, the moments that get replayed forever, the moments that fans pull out like weapons in arguments. There's the Clemens bat incident, which will never stop being debated. There are people who will go to their graves insisting it was an accident, and people who will go to their graves insisting it was the most deliberately provocative act in World Series history. There's 2006, when the Mets were the best team in the National League, loaded with talent, Delgado and Wright and Reyes and Beltran, and the Yankees were aging and vulnerable. Mets fans could feel it. The city was turning. And then the Mets collapsed in the NLCS against the Cardinals. Carlos Beltran stood at the plate with a full count, bases loaded, Game 7 on the line, and watched Adam Wainwright's curveball break across the outside corner for strike 3. He didn't move. The Mets' season ended in frozen silence. Yankees fans never let him forget it. There's 2007. There's the September collapse that Mets fans have still not fully processed. A 7-game lead with 17 games to play. Gone. Evaporated. The Phillies overtook them, and the Mets missed the playoffs on the final day of the season, while the Yankees, down the road of the Bronx, kept winning. There are the bleacher fights, the arguments that turn ugly in the upper deck, the viral moments of fans from both sides screaming at each other in a way that feels less like sports and more like something unresolved. There are the subway rides home after losses, where the wrong hat can make a long train ride very uncomfortable. There's the specific, particular torture of a Mets fan who has to share Thanksgiving dinner with a Yankees fan. The smugness, the gentle reminders, the way a championship ring can be dropped into a conversation like a grenade. There are also moments of something stranger than hatred. When September 11th happened and baseball stopped and New York bled together, Mets fans and Yankees fans stood in the same grief, and when the games returned, both stadiums felt sacred in a way that transcended the rivalry. For a moment, the city remembered that it was one thing, not two. But the rivalry came back. It always comes back, because in New York, identity doesn't take long off. Here is where we arrive. 60-plus years of this rivalry, 27 World Series championships for the Yankees, 2 for the Mets, a Subway Series that became permanent mythology, a broken bat, a frozen moment at the plate, collapsed seasons and dynasties and heartbreaks and glory. And the city is still divided. Walk into any bar in Manhattan on a night when they're playing each other and feel the air. It's different. There's something electric and dangerous and alive about it that you won't find when either of these teams plays anyone else. Because when the Yankees and Mets play each other, every fan in that bar is playing too. They're defending something that matters to them, something that was handed down to them or something they chose for themselves. The Yankees will tell you the answer is obvious. The pinstripes are the answer. The championships are the answer. History is the answer. New York will always be a Yankee city. The Mets will tell you that's exactly the problem, that inheriting greatness isn't the same as earning it, that loving a dynasty is easy, that the Mets fan who shows up year after year, through the collapses and the near misses and the what-could-have-beens, that fan loves baseball more honestly than anyone in the Bronx ever has. And neither side is entirely wrong, which is why this never ends. Because this rivalry was never really about baseball. It was about who you are when your team loses. It was about where you come from and what you inherited and what you chose to believe. It was about a city so vast and so contradictory that it needs two teams just to contain itself. So here is the question. Not who has the better roster, not who has more rings, not who's going to win the next series. The real question is this: who actually owns New York? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell us your team. Tell us why. Tell us what you've defended, what you've lost, what you felt sitting in those stands, or watching from your couch, or arguing on the subway platform at midnight. Because this city belongs to someone. The question is who?